Oh, this one's a doozy. There's a lot of content on YouTube which talks about this show and continuity. While doing research for this video, I saw that there are many people who have a lot to say about this show and its perceived creator, Dave Filoni. Okay, fine, most of the videos I've seen while researching for this video were people complaining about Dave Filoni's work. It's quite sad, actually, to see someone with as much passion as he has for Star Wars, and how many people have dedicated hours to just criticizing his honest work. Well, that's not what this video will be about. This video will talk about the importance of continuity and will use this show as the case study, not Dave Filoni. So, let's get to it. The Clone Wars is a 3D animated series which covers the events between Star Wars Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. It was created by George Lucas. Yes, George Lucas, not Dave Filoni. It was created by George Lucas and most of the stories were by him.
Well, isn't that cute? Come on, I'll show you around. Ha! Thought I was gonna say it was wrong, didn't you?
Yes, I know, right? Shocking. But that's the way it is. It started in 2008 and was cancelled in 2012 when Disney bought the Lucasfilm IP. But thanks to the overwhelming love for the show that the fans had and the sheer determination of Dave Filoni, the show was picked up again for a final season in 2019. The final season was entirely dedicated to Ahsoka's story, but that's a complaint I have for another day. Moving on. The show was a hit on Cartoon Network despite having a rocky start, and one of the main reasons folks like me had was how well it fit into the established narrative of the movies, especially the prequel trilogy. Other fans had issues with the way it fit into the expanded universe, which again I must say was never canon. George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars himself, said that it is not canon and is, at best, an alternative reality. That didn't stop him from using elements from the expanded universe that he found interesting enough to incorporate into the movies and, well, the Clone Wars. Because everything is Star Wars, people like to use the canon tier system to defend how the expanded universe was still canon despite the number of times the movies discarded what they explained, but never came to accept that it just wasn't. I'm sorry, but it wasn't. Disney didn't decanonize the EU. It was simply never canon. That's why it was actually clever to call it legends, because as you know, legends are stories that may or may not be true. That gives Disney leeway to get characters from the EU and do whatever they want with them, or straight up rip storylines from the EU whenever they want to and say that they're canon. That was brilliant. I'm a sucker for storytelling. I love consistent stories. I love stories that make paying attention to what's said, done, and implied by characters actually worth it. Not like X-Men, where listening to pretty much anything Charles says to Wolverine when he's showing him the mansion is completely discarded in the prequels. Seriously, did Matthew Vaughn watch X-Men or did he just read a summary? I digress. This is about continuity in Star Wars The Clone Wars. Before I get properly into it, I must say that at first I didn't like the show and didn't watch it properly when it was on Cartoon Network. I saw how much it violated and was like, nah, this ain't it, Chief, and stopped partway through the second season. I started it again around 2017. I must say that it was pretty good once you ignore the continuity. It really is. It explores so many characters and facets that the movies never would, even if they showed us more about the Clone Wars. Now that I got that disclaimer out of the way, let's start with the most obvious issue I have. When coming up with the show, George Lucas said to Dave Filoni that Anakin needs an apprentice. Filoni rejected the idea. George insisted. Filoni then agreed to it, but had also suggested that she be Obi-Wan's new apprentice. George was adamant that she be Anakin's apprentice. So Filoni got to work and created the look for the character. Somewhere along the line, I think, was when he fell in love with the character. So, people, Ahsoka wasn't Dave Filoni's creation. She was George's. Filoni just made her what she is today. Now then, why is this a problem? See, the movies made it clear that the Jedi Council didn't trust Anakin. They always had their suspicions regarding him. In fact, the first thing they decided after testing him and seeing his powers was that they would not train him. Yoda couldn't see his future. Despite him having the most inherent power out of everyone in the Order and clearly having a higher purpose than they could imagine, they decided not to train him. After Qui-Gon Jinn's death, they decided to train him. Even then, he was still not respected enough. Despite his growing skills and his obvious natural talent, he was still held back. It was because of his immaturity, but he still was being held back. The Council did it slyly, but Obi-Wan always said it to his face that certain things were beyond him. This conflict of interest was taken advantage of by Palpatine, and he groomed Anakin, always pampering him with compliments. It made it easy for him to convince him to turn against the Jedi. Anakin even had the feeling in Revenge of the Sith. He confided to Padme that the Jedi don't trust him. Whether that was true at that point in time is up for debate. What we do know is that they were paranoid about him. Mace Windu even straight up says that he doesn't trust him. Obi-Wan defended him. Yoda was conflicted and couldn't make up his mind. They simply trusted in the prophecy of the Chosen One. So, how is it that they would trust Anakin with a Padawan? How could they have someone so unstable, someone they don't trust to give them information on the Chancellor, be someone's master? It's a testament to how much skill he had, but the inconsistency in the characterization of the Council is showing here. How, if the movies established that they don't trust him, did they decide to give him a Padawan? Yoda explained it in the Clone Wars movie, yes, but even that doesn't align with what the movies established about the Council. If you watch the movies alone, you're never going to get the impression that these people would give Anakin a Padawan. You don't even get the impression that they once did and she left. This establishment blurred what was a clear description of the relationship Anakin had with the rest of the Jedi. It made it seem odd and out of place. Speaking of Anakin, the Clone Wars featured him heavily. I wish I could say that he was the main character of the show, but he wasn't. You don't want to know who actually was the main character of the show. It took us until the last season to find out, since, it was completely dedicated to her. Anyway, Anakin appeared a lot throughout the show, and apparently the show showcased his slow descent to the dark side. Yeah, pal, Anakin stabbing a guy in the back with his lightsaber isn't Darth Vader foreshadowing. Anakin choking Ventress with the Force when interrogating her isn't Darth Vader foreshadowing. Anakin getting aggressive against a guy who's putting the moves on his wife isn't Darth Vader foreshadowing. Anakin's fight against Barriss Offee wasn't Darth Vader foreshadowing. If he never turned to the dark side in the movies and remained a Jedi the whole time, you would never have said that those were indicators that he was falling to the dark side. You know why? Because those moments were actually all completely justified. You know what wasn't justified and was actual Darth Vader foreshadowing? Killing the entire village of Tusken Raiders, killing Count Dooku after disarming him with both metaphorically and literally. That's Darth Vader foreshadowing. Doing dark things when there are alternatives. Every one of those moments fans like to point out in this show actually justify Anakin's actions. The whole point of the dark side is that it's wrong. It's a corruption, a cancer to the Force, and destroying it completely is what brings balance. Those are the words of George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars himself. Anakin was portrayed as a brave war hero. Of course, that goes along with what the movies establish. The problem comes in with the details of his portrayal. See, Attack of the Clones had him as a late teen who was still having all these hormonal processes taking place, and then in Revenge of the Sith, he was almost done with the changes, but we could still see some of the issues there with his maturity. It wasn't fully biological, though. Palpatine also groomed him very well. So the way the Clone Wars presented him was very different from what he was in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. He was immature and complained a lot in Attack of the Clones, then he was mature and complained just a little, and was a lot moodier in Revenge of the Sith. And in the Clone Wars, He was a standard, hardcore, and resourceful military commander who was always locked in, like they say. It's like he evolved properly from Attack of the Clones to Revenge of the Sith, but if you put it in the way he was in the Clone Wars, he evolved backwards from the Clone Wars to Revenge of the Sith. There's no natural progression for the character anymore, there's no growth. His personality is just all over the place. The 2D animated series, Clone Wars, treated Anakin's personality growth better than the Clone Wars. I'm sorry to say this, but it looks like Genndy Tartakovsky did a better job at keeping things consistent than George Lucas, Dave Filoni, and Henry Gilroy. Yeah, that's right. I've been rewatching The Clone Wars and was surprised to see that Henry Gilroy directed so many episodes in the first season. I don't know about the rest of the show, but I do know that out of our first 11 episodes in the show, Dave Filoni only directed 2. The rest were handled by Henry Gilroy. Maybe it changes. I'll continue to pay attention to the end credits. Maintaining character traits is important when telling a story that spans several movies, and the job was not very well done with Anakin. It's nice that they explored his heroism in the Clone Wars. We got to see the brave hero who inspired loyalty and contributed greatly to the Jedi and Republic's cause. That was very good. We only got to see glimpses of that in the movies. This show helped the audiences see for sure what he actually was in the eyes of the galaxy. Obviously, there's no realistic way of having the characters explain every single thing that happened to them throughout the war in one movie and still have that movie's story move forward. So there definitely would be new things added to their adventures and backstories that were never told. Okay. So, when we talk about this, we need to look at the weight of the events that take place. To avoid talking about Anakin too much, let's talk about Obi-Wan. This show revealed that Obi-Wan had a crush on the Princess of Mandalore, a planet with warrior clans and families. His crush happened to be a pacifist. I wonder how that even worked. It's cool to show a new side to characters, but the problem is that the characters needed to be consistent with what we already knew about them. Obi-Wan in the movies didn't really show himself to be aware of how human emotions are. Every time Anakin talked about his mother, Obi-Wan would shut it down. Every time Anakin spoke about Padme, Obi-Wan would shut it out. It wouldn't be in a you have to keep your mind off of that, I get how you feel but this isn't right kind of way. It would be in a this again, you do know you're not supposed to feel this way, right? Kind of way. He wasn't very connected to his emotional side. The only love he had was for democracy and Anakin. Romantic love was out the window with him. He certainly had compassion, but nothing at all ever showed that he was ever once in love. One could say that it's because he was just professional that way, but we never see him express that level of understanding that would make us think that way about him. I will admit, having him have had a crush on someone at some point was a nice touch, but the movies don't do enough to show us how that is actually possible. The best thing we can go with is he's a human being. Of course, he felt something for someone at some point. Yeah, that's not really how it works. A lot of the defense and the inconsistency from recent Star Wars shows is defended with the technicality that goes like, well, they didn't say that it didn't happen, so you can't say that it didn't. Sure, pal, let's go with that. This was the most egregious sin the show committed, aside from uh, the most obvious one. When we watch Revenge of the Sith, we see that quite a lot of things happen. A lot of things take place that reshape the state of things in the galaxy. Obviously, those events take a long time to unfold. They don't happen over the course of 4 days. That's just not feasible. But then again, that's what Season 7 tells us. It tells us that Revenge of the Sith took place over the course of 4 days. You're kidding me, right? You're telling me that Coruscant was invaded, the Chancellor got kidnapped, rescued, taken back to Coruscant, Grievous was tracked down on a completely different planet. Obi-Wan was dispatched to go kill him. He goes and kills him. Anakin turns to the dark side. Order 66. The Republic becomes the Empire. Anakin and Obi-Wan fight. Darth Vader is put in his armor. Padme dies. Luke and Leia are delivered to the Lars homestead and Alderaan. All in the span of 4 days. You must think I have the IQ of a molten spoon, buddy. Yeah, sure. That's what canon says. But the fact that anybody thinks that that makes any sense at all is so funny, because that absolutely cannot be the case and isn't the case. Heck, you notice that Padme's belly actually gets bigger over time in the movie, right? It's not at full size in the first scene she appears in. You can pull all the mental gymnastics and, well, technically, arguments you want. That movie was clearly not taking place over the course of 4 days. That movie took place over the course of a month at least. And Ahsoka sensing pretty much everything Anakin was going through, but we never see Anakin sensing what Ahsoka is going through in the movie? Yeah, sure, pal. What were you trying to say about Ahsoka's force sensitivity compared to Anakin's? The movies state that he has the highest midichlorian count in the Order. That means that his connection to the Force is greater than everyone else's. It makes sense. He's the chosen one after all. He's supposed to be that powerful. By default, no one is supposed to be more powerful than him. Even Sidious. Yes, Sidious is inherently less powerful than Anakin. It wouldn't make sense to have the chosen one who is meant to destroy the Sith be less powerful than the Sith he's meant to destroy. So, how come Ahsoka can sense all of this? This was done to show the fans what was going on during the movie at that point that the show was in, but think about the implications it brings up. Those things brought more inconsistency to Star Wars than one would care to admit, simply because not many people care about what's shown. As long as they like it, it doesn't matter. And they will defend it against all common sense. I didn't particularly like Season 7, to be honest, but I did appreciate the passion that went into making it. I mean, they hyped up the Ahsoka versus Maul fight more than anything I've ever seen in Star Wars animation, and it just ended up being Ahsoka dominating Maul the whole time. Plus, why was I supposed to be excited to see that when the two have no personal history? I would have actually liked to see Anakin go up against Maul. Maul killed the guy who found him, right? That would be a much more personal and epic fight. Anyway, back to the point. Showing that Ahsoka was sensing all of that was theoretically a great bridge between the show and the movie, but was not a good idea overall. Remember the thing about George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars himself, saying that Anakin should have a Padawan, and Dave Filoni was like, nah. Yeah, well, that came to bite George Lucas in the butt. See, George's plan was for Ahsoka to die by the end of the show. That would either take place in the 5th season episode where she left the Order, or in the finale during Order 66. What a nice way to wrap up her story that would have been. But then, of course, we couldn't have such a wonderful, tragic end to a great character. Dave Filoni steps in and is like, nah, we aren't killing her off, George. And George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars himself, let Dave have his way. You know, George Lucas was surrounded by yes men during his tenure at Lucasfilm. The fans were totally right about that. So, she survives the show past the original trilogy and even past the sequel trilogy. Yeah, really. Dave Filoni said it himself. Dude, you can't make this up. She just happened to not be in the prequels because she was doing something else. She wasn't present in the originals because she was somewhere else. She wasn't in the sequels, save from her voice being heard along with the voices of dead Jedi, because she was somewhere else. It's like poetry. It rhymes. You just can't beat a man's love for a woman. Ahsoka's survival isn't the only thing that's out of whack here. We have Darth Maul as well, or as we have to call him at this point, Maul. Since he's no longer an apprentice of Darth Sidious and is no longer considered a Sith, he has to relinquish the Darth part. Yeah, that sucks for him. His survival also makes little to no sense in the grander context of the Republic. Killing off Satine was good because it kept the fact that she exists out of any questions we have in Revenge of the Sith. You know, Obi-Wan never mentioned her or even hinted at her having existed. Meanwhile, her planet is under siege during the events of the movie. It would have been worse if she were still alive. But Darth Maul being alive? Come on now. You know how Obi-Wan isn't really the type to give in to his emotions. I don't think he'd just go around living peacefully with Maul running around, or not have him mention that at all during Revenge of the Sith, which, by the way, took place over the course of 4 days, and he had just sent Ahsoka after him right before running off to rescue the Chancellor. Yeah, that doesn't work either. And again, contrary to what many may believe, this was George's idea. Dave Filoni just went along with it. He was against it at first, but George insisted. So Dave came up with the story where he comes back. However, this doesn't mean that he was meant to survive the show. This is on Dave Filoni. We did get word on George's plans for the sequel trilogy, and apparently Maul was going to be the main villain. But as far as we know, this show was not intended to end with Maul being alive. That part is up to debate since we also argue about its canonicity sometimes. We already discussed this in a previous video and I have a correction to make. I like to dunk on Dave Filoni for introducing this, but when researching for this video, I decided to look deeper into who came up with what decision in the writer's room. This came to me because people like to call this show Dave Filoni's creation, when it's actually George Lucas's. When I saw that, I started to have a better look at the production. People like to dunk on Dave Filoni for disrespecting other works within the Star Wars universe, and I decided to take a step back and look up every decision that I will talk about. To my great disappointment, the microchip idea came from George Lucas, not Dave Filoni. I was shocked to say the least. I was heartbroken. I couldn't believe my eyes. It's true. I loathed the microchip idea because it cheapened the whole thing. I still hate it, and it's one thing that I can't defend no matter what. I respect Decision a lot more now, knowing that the creator of Star Wars himself made it, but that doesn't mean that I have to like it. I respect it, but I don't like it. The microchip idea ruins the whole setup brought up in the movies. The Kaminoans perfectly describe the clones and their behavior. We know that the clones were made from Jango Fett's DNA, and Jango was working with the Separatists. There were enough clues there to make us understand just how the clones would turn against the Jedi so easily. I'm guessing George did such a good job at humanizing the clones in the show that he started to doubt the believability of their eventual betrayal. Dude, if you just gave them rational reasons for doing it, like maybe this is what we were bred to do the whole time, or our loyalty is to the Republic, not the Jedi, and then have them argue with each other about whether killing the Jedi would end the war quickly or not, so that they could go back home, as they have lost too many of their brothers. There were other ways of handling it, but it came from the creator himself, so I can't say much, apart from the fact that this does not fit in the context of the movies. Get the rest of my argument about this in our Importance of Continuity Order 66 video. So why the points? This is to explain that there are certain things in the story that work because they are consistent with what we are shown. If you want to have a cohesive universe that makes sense, you need to make sure that everything you wrote and established fits with what you're doing when you're expanding on the story. You need to be a mastermind and plan everything 14 years ahead like certain Hollywood geniuses do. It's that easy. Now, whether you end up retconning your decisions because it's all part of the grand design to make bad decisions that you have to go back on or not, it's up to you. The basic premise is keep your work consistent. Don't rely on technicalities like, well, they never said that it didn't happen, so you can't rule it out, to explain these plot holes. The characters' personalities don't match the movies. Some of the established stories don't match the movies. There's a lot left to be desired with the Clone Wars in terms of consistency with the movies. However, it is a great show. I highly recommend it. It has some really gripping storylines, and a lot of them will have you reflecting on the toll that war really takes on people in this fictional universe. Anyway, that was it from me. Let me know what you think about the importance of continuity. Should shows like The Clone Wars adhere to continuity strictly, or should they just do their own thing and only make sure that major things aren't violated? Does it matter if minor things are violated? Comment below and let us know. Also, check out our Facebook page, our Instagram page, and our new blog. Seriously, we need as many of you to check those out as possible. It's really cool stuff. You'll like it. I swear. Have a good day.